Settle matters. Um, Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is talking to you in court. Do it while you are still together in a way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge will hand you over to the officer, and you'll be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. Adultery. So this is another commandment. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for the whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it in because it'll cause you to stumble. Verse 31, divorce. It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard it said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not even swear on an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is a simple yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. You have heard it said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other cheek. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Okay, we got a lot. Murder. This is Matthew 5. So, since we didn't record the first part, Jesus is showing how God's holiness, his way of life, his standard of goodness is not dependent on what people decide. It's dependent on what God decides. And so with the fulfillment of the law, what we learned last time, he's showing us that this is unattainable, right? Looking at murder. If you're angry with your brother, that's just like murder, right? He's taking it, being like, you're used to just the act of chopping somebody's head off as murder, to now just the thought of doing it is murder, right? You thought committing adultery was having sex outside of marriage with someone else's wife or with somebody else's husband. It's like, that's just here. What God says is, even if you look at someone lustfully, that isn't your wife or your husband, you've committed adultery, right? And then he goes the next step with the divorce, right? They had a law from Moses that said you can give a divorce, and we'll talk about it in chapter 18, I think. But, right, it just said this is adultery if it's not done for the right reasons, right? You can't just get divorced for whatever reason. So the standard of God's expectation, his holiness, is way up here when people at the time had made it way down here, something they could achieve. And it gets to the problem we all have. It gets to the part where we, just like them back then, we have found ways, even in today's world, like they did back then, to set up laws that make us feel like we're in control. We set up rules for ourselves that make us think that we can live perfectly, right? How many of you guys have that, right? You set up your rule that as long as I don't swear out loud in front of my mom, I've done okay today, right? But when I'm playing video games with my friends, you know what? That's my standard, right? Or when Mr. Chris is around, I'm nice to people. But when he's not around, I'm mean, right? We set standards that we know we can meet because ultimately our lives, our love, it's all about us. Our reputation, the idea that we can show other people that we're good. When the real thing is, every single one of us, we've tried to be our own gods. We've tried to be the one in control of our own lives. We've tried to make the rules. Now we borrow from God for some of them to promote ourselves in front of our peers. But when we actually look at God's standard, that do not hate, right? Do not look lustfully. Keeping your word, just make your yes, yes, and your no, no. Back then, they would give like sandals and stuff to people to keep their word and like make deals happen. The heart of this is to show you that God's standard is way higher than yours. And in your own strength, as your own God, you will never be able to get there. Because if you think in your brain that you can do enough good to get to heaven, to do enough good things, you're putting yourself in the place of God. That heaven is yours to reach, not God's to give. And as soon as you think you can get to heaven on your own, you're declaring yourself God. But the great news is, as Christians, we say we know we can't because we know ourselves. We know this is way too much, right? And so we find our fulfillment and our righteousness, like last lesson, in the law, to be the one who lived it perfectly and gave his life by dying, actually dying on the cross, so that we can have his and he took ours. Because everyone says, oh, the Romans killed Jesus. It is a historical fact that the Romans killed Jesus. Okay, you can go back in time, you can check the documents. Jesus died on the cross. You can check the documentation, he was alive again after. Those are historical facts, right? But what do we do when we give it to him, right? Is it ours? Have you claimed it? And I lost my one idea, trying to get it back. Somebody send it back to me. So look at yourselves in light of God's law. His standard is here. Are you trying to make your own standards? Are you willing to come under God's standard, which can only be met in Jesus? Because we're just people. Any questions? People at home? Matthew, we're studying your book of the Bible. And the reason why, you guys might wonder, like, oh, why does Mr. Chris always bring up the fact that we claim to be God when we try to get there ourselves? It's because that's how I used to be. I used to think that my own efforts were going to be enough. And it took me too long to realize that it wasn't that at all. It's the opposite. And to think that I could really just put me in God, on the throne of God in my heart. And so with that, you guys take your notes. It is recorded. I'll try to post it with the other ones from last class soon. You need to tell Louisa how to find it. That is up to the next thing. But then the next is, we're going to talk about loving your enemies, eye for an eye, giving to the needy, prayer, how it is changed. The kingdom of heaven is different than the kingdom of man in how we love our enemies, and how we give, and how we pray. And so it's this continual showing us how the kingdom is upside down for Jesus. For you guys at home, it is time for you to work on your services action. We are running out of days. It's almost November. This is due December 7 with a documentary video, right? So make sure you're taking pictures of the process, videotaping yourself when you're talking to people or something like that, so you have content for your documentary. If you feel super stressed, I have a boxing bag in my office we can bring out here, and you can punch it if you need to, and then get to work. If you're Andika and you need to warm up by doing 20 push-ups, it's yours. I have turned down the temperature today just to see if anybody would be willing to run the clock tower for me as a test of your perseverance. I'm kidding. But get to work on your services action. That's what we're working on for the rest of class. Hey, not too bad. 1:20. I only went 5 minutes longer than I was supposed to. Emily's thankful. Get to work, get your service action out. And if you have questions, talk to me. If you need to be in a group call, try to do your group call through Teams. So join your group call through Teams. You can leave the Zoom if you need to. No.